YouTube. I was about to say, please don't be too long, YouTube. I don't know how I may have ADHD myself, but anyway, whether I do or not, I still hope to empower people with ADHD. I suppose if I did do a test and found I had ADHD, I'd want to empower people even more, I guess, because I like to help those with. I like to help people generally, but especially those with things in common with me. But anyway, welcome to the third and penultimate part of ADHD Mondays. I decided to take a bit of a break, just watch a bit of TV, and then get around to making this. Sometimes I like to have a break in between each video. Anyway, so this is the third and penultimate part. I talked about in parts one, especially in part two, about hearing from and reading from ADHDers, people with ADHD, about your experiences or their experiences, respectively, and family members, maybe even people like who are in relationships with. I'm aromantic myself, but some people talk about how ADHD or things like that can affect romance as well as like family relationships and whatnot. So obviously romantic, and I think they call it platonic relationships or whatever. I think that means with your friends or whatever instead. Big word for me. But anyway, these are pointers number 21 to 30 as ever. So here goes. So number 21. I'd love to know how. Well, some of those stories might be a bit sad or very sad, but how people with ADHD have been treated in the past and what's been learned in the past. Misunderstandings and mistakes that have happened in the past. And again, people with ADHD, I'd love to know ADHD's experiences in life, whether that's in the education system, in terms of the job market, in terms of employment, unemployment, or maybe even like running businesses or things like that. I hope people with ADHD from all sorts of walks of life get involved in the comments and talk about their experiences, and some of them might be similar to each other or even the same as each other, and some of them might be very different, but maybe people could talk about how they struggled in school and didn't fit in, and then they were trying to get tried to get a job and couldn't find a job, and then set up a business, or went from job to job and then set up a business or whatever. So those stories could hopefully inspire others. I also wonder how, I sort of briefly touched on it in part two, about like how I'd love to find out how ADHD affects like poets or wannabe poets, potential poets or whatever, similar with artists, again, wannabe artists, and the same sort of thing with writers, and people in different fields, like what are some bad fields maybe for ADHDers to go into, what are some good fields, what are some of the things, some of the careers, or even in school, like what are some of the subjects, and I think more importantly, careers that are worse for people with ADHD, and what are some of the ones that are best. It'd be great to find out about. I know I mentioned like this how to ADHD content, whether I like it or not is probably a lot better than mine, I'll be honest, but I'm sure there's lots of, if you Google like ADHD information, I'm sure you'll see lots of things, like lots of videos and books and things like that on Google. Hopefully these videos will inspire people to check those out. Probably a bit too lazy to check out the links. I did look into like how ADHD affects those areas. I guess with people with ADHD, if they're not interested in something, probably it affects them in like, I really can't be bothered to do that. Whereas if they like something, they probably stick to it more. And I think, as I mentioned, like oppositional defiance syndrome, I think people with ADHD and autism have that. Could be wrong. Based on that fact, sorry, what I've just said there about how it could be wrong, I'd love for people to let me know if I get any information wrong, or if you disagree with any of my ideas or any points I covered or whatever. If I get any facts wrong, as I say, or whatever, please let me know. Or any information or awareness as someone who's not an expert or whatever. And moving on, number 22, I wonder what the future can hold. I hope it can be a positive future for people with ADHD. I hope people will find out, like, say a kid struggling in school might think, oh yeah, these motivational and famous people have the same condition as me, or you don't have to be good at school to be a good entrepreneur. I know that can be a bit of a dangerous message, because you can say to people, oh, you don't have to try, or if you're not good at school, it's okay. But then, obviously not everyone can be an entrepreneur whether you have ADHD or not, and it can affect people differently. So, I mean, I guess unfortunately the other end of things, like people in prison and those who are unemployed, underemployed, living homeless, and all those things, all those sorts of negative statistics can also be people who struggle in school. So I think it is a bit of a difficult message, but it can be an inspirational message for people with conditions like ADHD to say, if you're not good at school, there's an alternative path that you can do. There's you probably can still set up your own business. In fact, a lot of the challenges you might have at school, like sitting still, following instructions, not being disruptive, as I talked about earlier in part 2, I think, not following instructions. I mean, that can be a bit of a weakness, obviously, but all of those things can be a weakness in the wrong setting. And even like sometimes in business, you probably do have to listen to some instructions or whatever. But being part of a network, I think, could really help. And on that note, number 23, I know I talked about asking the question, and as someone who doesn't know a huge amount about ADHD, I'd love to ask the question. And I guess there are like media depictions of ADHD which may not always be accurate, that maybe people like me and others are going on. But asking questions for people with ADHD hopefully can mean that my stomach rumbling there again. It often seems to happen when I make this for some reason. But anyway, to find out, like, again, people with ADHD sharing information, sharing their experiences, and answering questions like, and talking about what fields they work in. And maybe people have done a range of jobs and so go around a range of businesses, talk about what areas they really struggle with in the workplace and struggle in business or whatever, the struggles they've had and the things they've done well. So, for instance, someone might struggle with certain careers and say, "Well, I really struggled with this career because my ADHD didn't suit this career. But I found with my ADHD this area worked best." Or when I run a business, better still perhaps, I found that this area was something where I was weak at, or I could delegate. Maybe that's another thing, like delegating, just like with dyslexia, delegating to other people, like how to delegating the things that you don't like or you're not so good at, that kind of thing. So you can focus on the things you are good at and that you do like. As I say, that to me is a difference between like smart work. If it's more fun and you enjoy it, so it doesn't really feel like hard work. Just like if you eat something healthy but it tastes nice, you probably wouldn't feel like healthy eating. Just like Mo Farah said on that, the athlete, that's not his real name, but said recently. But anyway, for those who know, sorry for those who might not have heard of Mo Farah, but he's a British athlete and marathon runner, that kind of thing. But yeah, I know I talked about like sports stars and things like that. It'd be great to find out sports stars with ADHD, and again, entrepreneurs and people in different different fields. I use the term entrepreneur exchangeably, like business person, but autistics and ADHD is in business, like well, that's CEOs, MDs, chairwomen, and whatnot. And maybe a network could help, and also look at how organisations and society generally could help, how individuals, organisations, and society generally could help. Like, for instance, how banks can lend funding to people with ADHD, and so put information for like funding in a way which is not too much jargon or not too much for someone with ADHD to read that might have a low attention span. Maybe that could help, I guess. Also, like how politicians and councillors could, or basically people involved in the government, can make legislature, and people involved in law can help with ADHD. Maybe like giving advice on how to make sure they don't fall foul of breaking the law, and making things clearer, information clearer, instruction more clearly, or making sure it's repeated so people get it, I guess. And also, I'd love to see tax cuts for ADHDers as well as other atypical people, or slash neurodivergent, or whatever terminology is, or disabled people generally, and minorities. So for me personally, I'd love to see ADHDers as well as autistics and others to be tax exempt, or at least to pay the lowest amount of taxes possible. Also talking about how I'd love to see what ADHDers can do to contribute to each other's goals, including my 5 causes, perhaps if I can convince them or help them, encourage them to do that. If I can get any to be convinced to do that. So see how they can fundraise for or come up with ideas, creative ideas to get more funding and investment about, and then sponsoring for Italian football and or Celtic. I think that'd be pretty cool. Ideally, if I'm really driven. Point number 24, I'd love to create worldwide networks for ADHDs and their allies or supporters to support them worldwide. Number 25, I'd love to support publics more so I benefit. I'd prioritise rather benefiting republics more, so ADHDs in republics, and I'd love for, like I mentioned, like South Africa and places like that hosting events. I think it would be quite fitting considering they went through apartheid, and I mentioned before, like the academic system, the school system can feel a bit like apartheid in the sense that if you have a different way of thinking or a different mind, with its what some describe cookie cutter approach or one size fits all approach or whatever, they try and put square pegs in round holes or whatever, which causes a lot of damage for people to think and learn differently. So I think that would be quite fitting if they could host that event, and hopefully so the advantage in supporting people with ADHD and how they can benefit countries like South Africa or countries generally. Like I read something with I was thinking about the case for investing in dyslexics, which I've talked about in the past, and they mentioned how on this report which was shared on Google, it talked about like how dyslexics are more likely to set up more businesses and employ more people to delegate the things that dyslexics are weaker at, like maybe doing the reading and writing or things that require a lot of that. So I think people with ADHD would probably benefit a lot from. Could show that if people with dyslexia employ lots of people and set up more businesses, I'm sure people with ADHD do it to an even bigger scale, given that hyperactivity side of ADHD. I guess I'm imagining, and a lot of time it overlaps as well with conditions like dyslexia. So if you have ADHD, you're more likely to have, I think, conditions like autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, things like that. As I said before, I think it'd be too greedy to have like 6 different special needs or atypical conditions or neurodivergent conditions or whatever you want to call them. I don't know if I can be that greedy, but it would be interesting if I did have that many. More than pretty much anyone else. But moving on, number 26, as I say, I'd love 4 countries that are colonized, like Malaysia, India, Indonesia, South Africa, Singapore, and all over Africa and Asia to host events to have ADHD awareness across Africa and Asia and around the world, especially including in developing nations like across Latin America. From a selfish point of view, I'd say I would love to see Italy and Celtic hosting those events. Well, I think the Italian team one is selfish, but for Italy specifically, I would love it to be for football and what ADHDs can contribute to football. And as a fan of Italian football and Celtic, I'd love for it to be specifically for those teams. Maybe to an extent to like Leicester as well, where I grew up, and which is a very diverse place as well, and maybe Birmingham because that's quite diverse, maybe. But mainly Italian football and Celtic. But moving on, number 27, there could be a list and an acknowledgement, and an acknowledgement or list in the acknowledgement rather of those who support people with ADHD. Number 28, I hope that negative stereotypes can be challenged or smashed even. Number 29, I'd love to find out more about people with ADHD from more diverse backgrounds, like people with POC, people of colour with ADHD, and also like women and girls as well. Having more representation, because people say when you hear about stories of atypical people, neurodivergent people, you often hear of like white males, but not POC or minorities or women or girls or whatever. Like similar with autism, like how it affects people, and probably not the best. Leading on to number 30, I normally say that the more immature thinkers, I say rhymes with day, but autistics to get some ass. But on that bombshell, I am out. Peace and love. Sorry.